welcome to East Coast DNA. Today in the studio we have champagne weather. Now, James Hill.
Hi.
And we have Anne Janelle as well.
Yep.
So you guys traveled here together from Truro today?
All the way from Brookfield.
There we go, Brookfield. Is this where you originate from, or?
No.
So maybe you could each give me a little backstory on where you originally come from.
Okay, sure. We both originally come from the West Coast. We grew up south of Vancouver. I grew up playing the ukulele in a program that was taught by a Nova Scotian, somebody who'd grown up learning the ukulele from Chalmers Doan in Halifax. And so I always grew up with this very romantic idea of Nova Scotia and always was very much in love with the province, and gradually made my way here with Anne in tow. So what's your story?
Yeah, so James and I grew up in two different suburbs of Vancouver. And yeah, I started my musical life as a classical cellist. And I went quite far down that path, and then decided that I really loved songs and I was really interested in creating something rather than recreating music. And so that led me to songwriting and playing in more folky circles. And now we're going to talk about a brand new, exciting venture.
Yes, so
the next step.
You both have different backgrounds, but you're blending genres, which is something that we've talked a lot about on the podcast recently with people that don't necessarily fit into like a pigeonhole of a genre. But you're actually the second one that is mixing in some classical stuff that's been in this series. We
cool.
had Maureen Batt and Gretsch were on probably just like an episode or two before this one.
Oh, great. Yeah, nice.
So it's really exciting for myself as a music fan too, to see different genres coming out of this region. But I also find it interesting, especially with yourselves, where you say Vancouver, the different people that are moving into the East Coast and bringing different sounds with them and infusing them with sounds like your roots inspiration is regionally, that's what we're stereotyped as, is the East Coast. But bringing in these other sounds is kind of giving it a different spin. And I'm really curious myself as a music fan to see, you obviously would have some attention from Vancouver because you have connections being that you're from there. And then you're on the East Coast, so you're getting the East Coast feel and fan base here. I'm kind of curious to see where this is leading in the future for Music Nova Scotia and Canadian music in general. So are you guys, as a duo, you've played together, and now as this band name, what's different from what you've been doing historically?
Great question. Do you want to talk first? No? I know I am. Yeah, well, I think the short answer is the music is different. So James and I have been performing together for over a decade. Our very first collaboration was, I was completely entrenched in classical music, and James always had this folk element through the ukulele to the music that he played. And so there was an opportunity to record a song for a Japanese compilation, and they asked us to do a duo. I don't even know why. There was probably like extra musical. I know this, well, we don't have to tell them how many years ago it was. And then it was great because it was an arrangement of a classical piece. So I felt comfortable enough to kind of branch out a little bit, and we found pretty quickly that even though we'd been a couple for years and hadn't really considered playing together, that it was actually a great musical match. And we both had enough overlap in what we did and enough difference in what we did to make that duo work. And then we both started instrumentally, and then as I mentioned about me, and around about that same time, James is also interested in writing more songs. And then we've been doing that for quite a while. And now this new project, Champagne Weather, is the next step in our creative process, bringing all of these influences together. But do you want to talk a bit about the new band?
Sure. I mean, we both grew up playing some classical music, some modern classical music, some Baroque music and stuff, and we, at least I grew up playing a lot of folk music and garage rock and like stuff that that was off that classical spectrum, I guess you could say. But what my first band was me with a 8-track tape machine, releasing little records when I was at university. And so around that same time, we both went to university in Vancouver at UBC.
That's where we met.
And that's where we met. And at that time, I met Giorgio Magnanensi, who is an Italian composer, director, performer, teacher. He had at that time was recently arrived in Canada, and he brought this whole sort of European modern classical edge to what he was doing at the University of BC. And that just lit me on fire. Like, really, that was, for me, it was life-changing to study with him. I mean, you talk about the influence of, other people from other places in Canada coming to the East Coast, but then you've got the broader influence of people coming from other cultures and other countries to Canada itself. It's a similar kind of effect, and I was extremely taken with his approach to music and to music making, to conducting music, to scoring music. And it was almost like he gave me this gift that I didn't really know how to open at that time. I mean, it was in my early 20s, and I knew this was music that I connected with very deeply, modern, improvised, gestural music.
Well, I remember, because I had Giorgio too, and one of the big things I remember about his teaching is talking about gesture in music. And this was at a time when I was crafting my cello skills, and it was all about this bowing and that fingering, and he was talking about gesture, and I was like, wow, like it was so zoomed out. I was so used to being, your head in the engine, like all these details. And he was just, anyway, I loved his gestural approach to music. So that was one example of.
Yeah, that made a huge impact on me. Like, gesture being essentially, what are you actually trying to say? Like, never mind all the little nuts and bolts of maybe what fingering or what string, or if you were a songwriter, what words or what rhymes you're using. But like, basically, what's your point? Is what he was asking. Whether that's a short musical phrase, whether it's a poem, whether it's a song, what's your point? And it really sort of, it really cut to the quick. And those lessons stayed with both of us for a long time. But we couldn't process that right away. I've sort of carried this around with me.
So different than anything that we'd had experienced before.
Yeah.
It's like having olives for the first time. It's like,
yeah, do I like this or not? And so in the meantime, then we went on and had, sort of parallel careers and a career as a duo, playing roots-inspired original, songs. And instrumentals across Canada, around the world. And at the same time, we were sort of carrying this influence of modern music, modern classical music with us. And it was only maybe, I would say, maybe 3 or 4 years ago that we finally found a very narrow path to combine these things, and we've been woodshedding away, writing and experimenting with this new sound that for us finally sort of reconciles these two lives that we've always led. And so that's what Champagne Weather is. That's a very long answer, kind of like the first chapter of my autobiography.
Well,
It's not supposed to be that, but there you go.
I did go back in researching, preparing for your visit too, because there's only like a limited amount of content to review for Champagne Weather. I went back to look at you as individuals, especially on Spotify, because I was setting up today. It was easier for me to get a few extra ones in while I'm messing around with the gear. I don't know if you guys maybe noticed, I was live streaming for a little bit and it was playing in the background the whole time. So,
Oh, cool.
but that was one thing I noticed, especially when you guys were working together on stuff that you had already collaborated on. Once again, like I said, with trying to put a genre on the bands that I've been interviewing is impossible. But you guys, I was hearing like, oh, well, this one sounds like a little like an indie folk song, and okay, well, this one sounds way more kind of a classical inspiration to it, but there was other ones that were so blended that it needed a different word.
Mm-hmm.
You have to make up something new. So I can see where organically you guys were heading towards, oh, we need to label it Champagne Weather, so you have something rather than saying we play, here's a whole paragraph of genres mixed together to explain what it is.
Yeah.
Kind of to your point, when you were talking about the music, to what's your point, rather than worrying too much about the details and how to structure a song. It's like, what are you trying to deliver? Like, it's nice to have a label that's your own. So eventually, and I said this to a couple of other artists too, eventually instead of me saying what type of music is it, it's a Champagne Weather song.
Mm-hmm.
And it will just sound, people know what that means.
Well, and I love that observation, because I think in our younger, when we were younger on our career paths, it almost felt like trying on different outfits. It's like, let's try on this song that's a little bit like this, and then I'd hear a song from a hero, and I want to write one like that, and you sort of, it just felt like trying on somebody else's clothes, though. And I feel like with Champagne Weather, for the first time, I do feel like it's a consistent sound. And it's not like one of these, and then wait, if you don't like this one, the next one's going to be different. It's a vibe. It's a place where we can like just sit for a while. And that I really appreciate. And hopefully, that would be such a dream to have you hear something someday and be like, oh yeah, that's so Champagne Weather. That would be great.
Where does the actual name itself come from? Is it a clever wordplay on something?
No, nothing clever about it. It was from a dictionary. Our brother-in-law showed us this dictionary of Victorian English expressions, so like slang from the Victorian era. And that was an expression in there that just jumped out at us. We loved it. It's actually sarcastic. When they say Champagne Weather, they're talking about the kind of weather that you would never go out in to have a picnic. It's like, oh look, Champagne Weather again, kind of thing. And I don't know, just caught our attention, and we loved the vibe of it, and sort of the fact that it's not very clever, that it has a history, that it was an expression that people used to use. But now we can make it our own.
Kind of moody, like it seems evocative.
It does sound like I've mentioned the name to a couple of people that knew I was preparing for stuff, and nobody asked me what it means. It just immediately, like, even myself, like, I tend to pepper my vocabulary with a lot of expressions and stuff that I've picked up over from lots of different origins.
Now you can add one more.
Yeah, exactly. But it's not one I knew, but it just, I remembered it as soon as I heard of you, and you're also up on my wall. You noticed that on the way in. So.
I did. The Post-it Wall of Fame.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's an album that you're going to be releasing in next year some point. You have Music Week, which is why you're here today, because we're doing a series of Music Week interviews, but you're doing a showcase as well. Which day is your showcase?
It's Friday. Friday night.
Friday night.
Are you going to be there?
Oh, well,
Okay.
I'm going to be set up at the main hotel, so I'll be
Okay.
at most shows.
Friday, 7:15 at the Steel City venue. Yeah.
Awesome. And what can people expect from that show then? Is it going to be all new Champagne Weather stuff?
Yeah, it's going to be all brand new Champagne Weather stuff, because everything Champagne Weather is brand new.
Yeah.
But it'll be us and with our good friend Sarah Frank from the Bombadils. She's sitting in with us on synth.
Awesome.
And that's really the third ingredient in the Champagne Weather sound. It's 2 stringed instruments. Anne's always playing the cello. I go between playing the ukulele and the fiddle. And then we have Sarah on synth holding it down, grounding us, and then we sing over top of that. And that really is that's the palette that we're working with, and we've written a bunch of songs in that sound world, and we're excited to share them with people.
Is Sarah fortunate enough to be on the same bill that night with her own band? Or is she jumping across?
Their showcase is on Saturday.
Oh, okay. So it's
it's
spaced
perfect,
apart. So you guys
actually.
can see each other's shows.
Exactly. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
That's really exciting.
Yeah, it works out really well, and we've rehearsed with her, and it's just it's just coming together so nicely. We're pretty excited after, like a lot of people I'm sure are saying this, but after the pandemic, coming out of the lockdown and being alone for a long time, I really think we're going to see, and we are seeing, this real supernova of creative output that's come out of the pandemic years. And Champagne Weather, although we started it just before the pandemic, it really incubated in a nice way during the pandemic, because it is kind of I don't know, it is music that's full of energy and life, but in sort of a moodier way. And Champagne Weather songs don't have the same anatomy as a regular song. They don't have here's the verse and here's the chorus and here's the bridge. They're not constructed like that. They're much more ambient, and we're drawing inspiration more from like Steve Reich and Philip Glass and Brian Eno, and so the songs themselves kind of float along and sort of envelop you, and that was really healing music to work on during the pandemic, and I hope that it'll resonate with people even now.
I did see in your video promo that you have on your own website, you would refer to the music being like clouds.
That's true.
Yes.
Yeah.
And actually, once again, it's one of those things that without really having a definition of what that means, as soon as I hear it, I know what your point is. I know what you're saying.
That's good. I'm glad to hear that.
Well, and so we live in a small town, so we live on some acreage, and both of us are pretty inspired by nature and have a lot of access to it where we live, which has been wonderful. But I'm these are the kinds of conversations that we have around the dinner table of like, I wonder what like music of the clouds sounds like, or I wonder what music that depicts the red maple leaves in the chilly autumn breeze, like what does that music sound like? And so I think a lot of those images are images that inspired that kind of texture that we're working with. And I also wanted to, this is geeking out a little bit, but there's an element of surrender in the performance. So one of the exciting and fascinating maybe aspects of the music is that we all the 3 performers have their musical material, and they have their decisions to make about that. And we make our own decisions at our own time. And so that means that it's changing, but in different ways every time we perform it. And so there's an element of surrender every time we start a new piece because we don't know exactly how it's going to go. And if James changes here and I don't change until later, it changes the whole harmonic structure, that whole underpinning of the music. And so every time we play it, there's this element of, just of surrender, which is a really fun aspect, at least from our point of view. It always keeps it very fresh.
It's also terrifying. Like we were just rehearsing today, and I was, I'm singing the melody, and all of a sudden the ground shifts under my feet, and it's by design, and I know that it's coming, but it's still a little bit terrifying. There's still a feeling of free fall when you literally don't know what's coming. It would be like skiing downhill blindfolded, but the musical equivalent of that. And yet it is always so fresh to us. And I think when performers are feeling that surprise and delight along with the audience, as those sands are constantly shifting in the music, I can only hope that at least some people in the audience feel the excitement of that.
One thing that I picked up too when I was watching some of your videos earlier in the week, I was kind of comparing it myself. I didn't have a way of phrasing it, so I'm not being very articulate with it at the moment. But it was, to me, almost like you were taking the kind of jam band type thing that was permeated through folk music. And actually, Aaron McDonald and I just talked about this the other day because that's his world. And he was taking that jam band influence into his folk and pushed it into more country rock. And that's something that I've seen. And I was just recently talking about it and then exposing myself with your music and the different genres. I'm seeing the same thing, but with classical.
Right.
It's bringing like the jam motif to some more traditional instruments.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, and it is a little bit hard to explain to people what is going on in Champagne Weather because it is improvisation. We are jamming, but it's not quite jamming in the traditional sense because it's more jam by decision making. Like we play the same material every time we play the song. We just don't always play it in the same order, and we don't tell each other how we're going to shuffle the deck. So it's not like they're laying down a chord progression and then I get to play a solo over it. It's like all of the building blocks of the structure are constantly in flux, and that's what gives us the improvised aspect of it.
Sure.
So it's it's wild.
But I love that. I love that analogy, and I think it ends up having a similar feel. It's just a different way of expressing that same need to explore. It's almost just like an exploratory kind of a mode.
Yeah, we've also had some hip hop and rap artists, and some of the people that are just starting up. There's been a few of them that were on here, and a good streak there, and a few that I talked to that were around recently in the county, and a few of those artists I know as well, where they do freestyle rap.
Oh, cool.
Even though as an outsider, you always picture that as just being like, oh, well, they're just really good at just making it up on the fly. There's a little bit of pre-work with some of it as well, where, well, I need a couple lyrics that I can pull from so that when I'm sitting there and the beats are happening, I can drop in and
that
kind of
reminds me of
another ebb
bluegrass.
and flow. Yeah. And I think that's part of the culture of, like, and you had mentioned yourself about just Canada in general, different countries providing people that are all moving here and bringing different cultures and mixing together. I think where Canada is a free country, and for the most part, despite all of our politics, for the most part, most people are pretty open-minded and accepting of the fact that there is other cultures. And maybe we don't all understand them, but there seems to be an inquisitive part of being Canadian where it's like, well, what is that? And how can I adapt that to my way? Even traditional East Coast stuff that we have, in the way we cook, things that we bake, our dialects that's regional, even though we're all speaking English, they all tie back to all the different countries that we originated from. But nobody has a hard time, really, we all make jokes. Nobody has a hard time sitting and having somebody that lived their whole life in Halifax versus Cape Breton versus Newfoundland, Digby, somebody from any of the Acadian communities. Like, there's all different dialects, but everyone understands each other and appreciates that we're all creating stories and sharing with each other.
Mm-hmm.
And it just seems like our music is organically getting to that point where it's just the same thing. It's a melting pot of genres together as well. So it is really exciting, like I said, again, as a fan, to see that you're taking genres that I appreciate. Maybe I don't understand all of them and don't have the exposure to all of them, but I'm seeing where it's being pulled into stuff that I do have the context for. And then when it all comes together, I'm like, oh, I really like this new sound that I never considered before.
Yeah. And I mean, I feel like many people feel on the outside of classical music for whatever reason. People on the inside and the outside, I think, are responsible for that, which I think is quite a shame.
It's like wine drinking.
Yeah, sure. Sure.
You may have noticed I have a couple empty bottles in the other room as display. And anyone that listens to the podcast knows that I've mentioned several times, I don't drink very often at all. But when it comes to wine, I will buy a bottle. I'll enjoy a glass of wine.
Yeah.
I can have it with a meal. But if I'm with a wine connoisseur, I'm not even going to mention that I know anything about wine, and I'm going to avoid the topic. Because I don't want to talk because it's overwhelming. It's too much.
Or they'll feel like ashamed. Or
yes.
I think it's so true. That's a perfect analogy, because I think that's often how people feel about classical music or music theory, or like, I don't know. But one of the beautiful things about music is you don't have to know.
Yeah.
All you have to do is experience it. And another thing about the Champagne Weather sound is because it is so complex, you can't make sense of it. It overwhelms your intellect, hopefully, to a point where you stop even, hopefully, trying, it's just like, this is happening. I'm experiencing this. I don't need to know what classical music is, or how to play a scale, or music theory. I don't need to know any of that, but it is this element of what I'm hearing, and that's it. That's good enough.
I think that's so important, and it's so important to overwhelm your audience. That's not quite what I mean. I mean, you're trying to overwhelm the senses in order to break through the smart part of the brain that is just trying to label things and put them in boxes and get through the day. If with the Champagne Weather sound, if we can sort of get past that gatekeeper to a point where people are just experiencing and being with us in the moment, as we are all being surprised by what's unfolding, because we are too, because that's the way the music is written, that everyone on stage and off will be surprised. Then we're really getting somewhere, and that's and I will say also, you say that the music is, Champagne Weather is so complex. It doesn't have complex building blocks. This is important to me because I've always been intimidated by complex music. I've always been like, I don't know, maybe I don't know enough to listen to this music. But the thing is, with Champagne Weather, all of the building blocks of it are very simple. Like, most of my parts that I play on the uke or on the fiddle, most of them I can play with, like one finger on the fretting hand, or the parts themselves are not complex. It's the way they interact with each other that becomes almost infinitely variable. And so it's not like we're up here shredding. It's that the combinations become infinitely fascinating. So I just wanted to throw that in the mix.
And so after Music Week, is there any plans to do any live performances? Like, obviously you're going to be hard at finishing off an album, getting it all ready to promote. And I do see like your website, and we have a cool logo on the screen here for you guys today too. So I see that you're you're not just recording a couple songs in your basement and putting them online. You have a campaign ready to kind of push out there, and you're going to be
I'd
putting
say so.
effort in.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like we're in this for the long haul now. We got a logo. We got to do it. No, just kidding. Immediately we're looking at an EP release in April. So that's our next.
Cool.
So that will be a few choice locations across Canada.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then looking ahead to our next full length after that. But we did a Banff residency, a winter residency, and we just wrote a ton of music. So I think on like right at the top of my list is getting back to Banff so that we can just have a whole bunch more music that we can be experiencing and writing, and just sinking deeper into this sound.
Awesome.
Also, I have a project that is a spin-off of this project. It's called Ever.fm, ever.fm. And it comes directly out of this project. The Ever.fm is a new way of recording music. It captures music essentially in sort of liquid form, where the songs are not set in stone in the recording. I just came back literally, 48 hours ago from Santa Monica in California, where I was presenting at a music technology conference, and I was presenting this project, Ever.fm, and did really well and had a lot of interest. People fascinated by a way of recording that allows the songs to literally reassemble themselves every time you hear them. I've been working on this for as long as we've been working on Champagne Weather, because when we first started recording these songs as Champagne Weather, we realized that it was really limiting in the studio to only be able to record one version when there were potentially thousands or tens of thousands of ways that this could unfold. It seemed kind of a shame to just commit to one. And so we started looking around for some kind of technology or platform or, I don't know, whatever. We thought surely there's a way that we can record multiple versions in a single master and have them kind of randomly come out whenever you hear the song. You don't know exactly which version you're going to hear. No, we couldn't find anything. Couldn't find anything like that. So we started the long process of building it. And so that project is also coming to sort of a mature point at the same time as this band is coming to a point where we're ready to get out there and start showing people what we've been working on. So also keep your ears peeled for that one, Ever.fm.
Absolutely. Is that like recording down to like the stem level? Is that type of thing? And then
it's certainly working with stems and also segments of stems, and also introducing something that I think is a fascinating wrinkle, which is sort of this idea of probability mixing. So not only are you choosing, how loud a thing should be or whether it should be left and right, you're also choosing what is the probability that it will actually be heard at all. And what is the probability that a different variation of that stem might be swapped in at that time. So it creates almost like a new axis for recording.
There are a couple previous guests that were on this podcast that I hope are listening to this interview, because I know that they would find it fascinating.
Cool. And it's not a genre thing. I mean, we're not trying to invent a genre. It's a cross genre thing, because whether it's hip hop and you say, well, who wouldn't love to just drop in a new verse once every 1,000 spins? You have a new verse, or in a folk song, you might have harmonies appear and change. You might have storytellers with different threads that unfold in certain ways. A different guitar solo, different drum fills. I mean, it applies to genres right across the board, but the whole inspiration for that product and platform and that technology has come from Champagne Weather.
Yeah, no, that's really, I would like to hear more about that in the future. If you want to send anything through, we can talk about it on the podcast.
Yeah, I'll definitely send you an update as things progress.
That sounds really cool. The closest thing I would have seen as a music fan myself, which you guys are sitting beside a good chunk of my collection, so you can see I have some different stuff. But
tapes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, like Jack White had done one where you could start the needle at different points to play the song through differently. And
Yes.
yeah, that's always fascinating.
Imagine a record with like 1,000
Yeah.
threads. That
That's why I'm pausing now. I'm thinking about it instead of continuing the interview. I'm like, wow. Now I'm in the clouds.
Right. Yeah. No, I mean, I didn't necessarily come here to talk about that, but it is a natural outgrowth of this project. So it's relevant.
Yeah, that's really exciting.
Yeah.
And so you guys also brought us some instruments. I'm sure some of the people that are watching the video version are seeing them to either side of you. So would you like to give people a little bit of taste on what this champagne weather sound is that we're all talking about? Welcome back. We had a nice little musical treat here from Champagne Weather. What was the name of that song?
Rise.
Rise. And that'll be available to everyone in the spring on your
That's the
April
idea.
EP?
Yeah.
Awesome.
And we're playing it in our showcase too.
Awesome. I'm excited to see that. So I'd like to thank you guys for coming here and making the trek into the apartment studio. Give a good word for us if you're speaking to any of your other community musicians, because you guys are handy. So it's a nice and easy drive to get down if anybody wants to pop in and try the same thing.
Yes. Well, thanks for all you're doing to support the music in this part of the world. We really appreciate it, and we really appreciate you having us on the show, giving us a chance to talk about our newest project.
Great. Thank you. And
Thanks, Darcy.
hope to see you next weekend.
Yes, can't wait.
Look forward to it. See you then.
Bye.